Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast, episode 51. I am Cullen McFader, and as always, I'm joined by Clark Coffey. How's your day going?
Hey, man, my day is going pretty well. How about you?
It's going well. It's haven't done much other than this, but nothing to complain about.
I was doing my taxes.
There you go.
Before this, so I'm like very, very, very happy for
what
shift.
Is tax? What's your tax season cutoff?
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So I think it's the 18th of April this year.
Okay, so it's like pretty much the same as ours.
So it's and I am admittedly kind of ahead, but that is because in a couple weeks I will be leaving for France, where my wife and I will be for 3 weeks ish or so. So I just wanted to get this like knocked off my to-do list, so I don't have to rush, and I'd only have like a week or so, when I get back from France to do this. So I'm like, let's just get it done. It's a painful experience. I'd rather just have it out of the way than having to look forward to it.
That's very fair. Yeah. Well, this is not the tax podcast.
This is not the tax podcast. Thank goodness.
But yeah, we're going to be talking today about your pick, which was 1984's Amadeus.
Milos Forman.
Milos Forman, yeah. Starring Tom. I always am worried that I'm going to mispronounce his name.
You're not.
Tom Hulce.
Hulce.
Tom Hulce.
I think it's Hulce, yeah. Starring Tom Hulce. And
it's one of those, it's very clearly like an a Anglo-Saxon
But wait.
name,
You can't just say starring Tom Hulce. I mean, come on. You have to put in F. Murray Abraham. I mean, come
especially
on.
considering that he won the Oscar for it. Yeah.
Well, they were both nominated, and he actually won. And we're going to get to more of that. But his performance is just, in my opinion, just outstanding in this film.
Yeah.
But
you get some good makeup on him too.
Yeah,
we'll talk aging effects. Yeah,
we're gonna get to all of that, but yeah, like amazing makeup actually. I'm a big fan of practical effects, so it's no like deep fake here, actual real makeup. But
I guess what I want to know first too is like because this was not that this is an unknown movie by any means, but I was sort of an unexpected pick in terms of like when you said this, I was
did it
like,
surprise you?
I just was not really thinking. I don't know. I don't know why I was unexpected about you picking this movie. So what made you pick it?
I expected that you would feel that it was unexpected.
You're twisting the script on me.
Well, so let's break it down. So we have a mid '80s film, and if you notice, a lot of the films that I've picked are kind of in this time zone, and the reason being is because this is when I was kind of coming into the world of cinema. I was like old enough to start watching things, and the films that I saw between 8 to 12 to 15 or whatever, like profoundly impactful on me. But I'll tell you, why I picked this film. I mean, I think that it's a fantastic film. I think it does hold up. There are a lot of Academy Award winning films that don't hold up. I mean, and that's maybe we could do an episode one day on those, because I think it's interesting to kind of analyze those films that won Academy Awards but really don't stand the test of time.
Well, even look at the things that it was up against, which is interesting because maybe one or two of them are sort of known movies, but the other ones really aren't that famous. It was up against The Killing Fields, Passage to India, which was David Lean, Places in the Hearts, and A Soldier's Story, which was
and how many of those films are still regularly viewed? I don't think so.
Kind of lexicon of
So but I think this film does hold up. But the reason that I picked it is that this film means a lot to me personally, and I guess what I mean when I say that is that for better or worse, I can really, really, really relate to what Salieri represents in this film, what he symbolizes, this longing for greatness. And I think everybody, to some extent or another, has experienced this longing to be great. We've all experienced jealousy in different ways in our life at different points. Hopefully we're not consumed by it like Salieri is. This is obviously a really, a hyper representation of this. But I mean, but that longing to be great, and that, to be so I think this film just does such an extraordinary job of representing what it feels to want to be great at something, and to recognize greatness, and to be so deeply and profoundly moved by greatness, and
filled with jealousy too,
and to be filled, because I mean, I got this. Like, I'm gonna admit more than maybe I should admit to in this podcast and get personal here. But look, I mean, I have to tell you that it is uncommon for me. Like, let me say this a different way. When I experience what I consider to be profoundly moving, great, aesthetic, awe-inducing works of art, there is always, alongside my experience of that aesthetic awe, a little sliver of deep, deep longing about wishing that I could make something that great. And so this film, to me, better than any other work that I've ever experienced, really just nails down that experience, which I have, I would say regularly, but, throughout my life I have had. And that's why I picked this film. That's why this film means something to me.
Well, that's it's a very great assessment.
You're
of
like,
it. I mean,
you're like, oh my God, this guy's got problems.
No. I mean, it's a totally I think universal kind of feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially for artists.
I think so.
Where you'll see. I think even friends of mine, when they make something that I think is magnificent, it's not for me. It's less so an element of envy, but you always kind of get a little hard on yourself.
Yeah, it's longing, right?
Where like you're kind of like, and perhaps I think the irony of it again, and when we were talking before, I kind of very briefly just brought up the idea of like imposter syndrome, but perhaps the reason for it is also just because you obviously aren't going to recognize. Very rarely do people recognize their own talent.
Absolutely.
And so like perhaps I have no idea. Maybe when I make something, my friends have the exact same feeling that I have.
Sure.
And because you see all the intricacies of your own work, but there's also a very real thing of recognition, and how Salieri is very clearly not recognized, and not he envies not only to have the genius of Mozart, but the recognition and the fame and the fortune.
And I know what that's like. And I know what that's like too. I mean, look, I'm the guy that at 30 years of age or whatever it was, I quit my successful career in the corporate world and moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting. And that was a profound experience. That the years that I spent doing that had a huge impact on my life. But so I understand what that is too. Not just through that. I mean, we all, again, it's universal. I mean, I think all of us know what it is to want to be recognized, to want to be appreciaed, to want to be accepted.
Absolutely.
And I just think this film does an absolutely fantastic job of representing that. And even though Salieri, that those elements are heightened quite greatly in this character, he's also still very sympathetic. At least I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, he appreciates the greatness of Mozart, unlike anyone else, like nobody else.
Well, I think the brilliant thing about that, though, that this movie really is that in any other movie, Salieri would be nothing more than the adversary. But the fact that this movie centers the story on him makes him automatically much more sympathetic, which I think is a much more interesting choice.
Absolutely.
If this movie did not have any of the, I mean, I say present day, it's not present day, but the thing after Salieri's suicide attempt where he's, retelling this story to the priest. If none of that was involved, Salieri would be nothing more than just the antagonist of the movie that kind of pops in and out. In
a lesser film, you're definitely right.
Exactly.
And I love that every element of this film, I mean, even the title is this ironic, jab, right?
Yeah.
Because it should be titled Salieri, but it's not. Yes. It's titled Amadeus.
Or like Salieri v. Mozart.
But it is Salieri's story. Absolutely, positively, without any question, it's his story, and it's
you don't actually really get to know Mozart that well, and there's nothing about everything that is told about Mozart's personal life prior to what we see is through Salieri, about his childhood, about all that. With very few exceptions, perhaps like maybe the bits with Mozart's dad, but even that is still very observant. It's not necessarily, you're never really getting this like long drawn out scene of Mozart monologuing about how he's, he longs for his father's relationship to be rekindled or whatever.
And of course the film very clearly bookends, right? It's like you talk about how it's, literally it's Salieri telling this priest in an asylum about, tells the story that we see unfold before us. I mean, it's so clearly from Salieri's point of view, and it's so clearly about him, which I think makes it great. And so it's always a laugh to me that the film is named Amadeus, because it's like just one more like jab at Salieri. It's like, haha, Salieri, even in the movie that's really about you, it's going to be called Mozart. He's going to steal the title away from you. Yeah. So I just love it. But I mean, let's talk a little bit, because we kind of skipped over it, but I'm just curious, kind of like, what was your personal experience of the film? Did you see it when the film, well, obviously you didn't see it in the 80s, but did you see it before?
So it's my mom, I think it's my mom's favorite movie. I believe, okay. I think it's because it's the one that she definitely talks about the most, and she like went to Vienna to see, even when we were in Prague, because the movie's shot in Prague, but set in Vienna. And she was always very excited when we were in Prague to see the locations from it and things like that. But the first time I saw it, the first and only, as far as I know, I don't think I've ever seen it since then, was probably I was 6 or 7, I want to say. I was really, really young when I saw this movie on VHS, when it was the 2 VHSs in the box, because it was too long to fit on one VHS. And I just remember, just knowing that like it was a movie that my mom really liked, and thinking that at the time, because I was so young, not really understanding the, in a way, sort of satirical elements of it, that I just thought it was kind of a pretty straightforward historical drama, and I remembered it as such. And so
it's a documentary.
Was kind of surprised this time to watch it and see how, for lack of a better term, lighthearted, how comedic it is, how much it pokes fun at all these elements, and kind of is not only utilizing Mozart as a way to laugh at the kind of common courtesy of the time of mannerisms and interrelationship and the way that you talk to people. It uses him to kind of placate like almost like a 20th or 21st century view on those customs of just like super heightened politeness, and that he very much is kind of like the audience's way in by just making all those things kind of a laughing stock. But also the fact that it is very, very relatable and accessible in the way that it again presents these elements in a very, through a lens of the modern day. It's not, and this is a movie that I love, Barry Lyndon. It's not Barry Lyndon. It's not presenting the film in a very, very heightened artistic 17th or 18th century style. It presents these things as, again, just kind of like a modern eye looking on them. And to me, that is a really brilliant choice, because it makes it makes these characters much more understandable. You kind of understand their needs and desires, and you're much more empathetic towards them, because they don't seem like people in a painting. They seem like people that are, existing in the real world, despite the fact that the movie is not accurate in the slightest in historical sense,
right?
With exception to perhaps like the very, very broad general details. It's not, of course Salieri and Mozart did know each other, and those elements are true, but they, that the story itself, the plot
totally
of the film is totally fictional. It's like a fan fiction.
It's totally fictionalized, and I would liken it to it's almost like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or something. I mean, the location is real, the time is real. There were people with these names that did exist, and the film definitely uses both Salieri and Mozart's real music, and almost all of these main characters, or I think all of the main characters, actually did really exist. But the story that's told here is completely fiction. I mean, I think in the research that I did, which admittedly was limited, but and scholars' understanding of these things is also limited. But I think that Salieri and Mozart actually coexisted, appreciated and respected each other for the most part. So this whole thing is just dramatized, but
I also think that we should mention just briefly that we both watched this time the director's cut and not
and the director's cut. So yeah, I mean, look, the theatrical release wasn't a short film. I think it was about 2.5 hours long. This version adds 20 more minutes, and it's interesting to note, like, for example, if you were to go watch this on Netflix, or I think it was at one point, I'm not 100% sure if it's still up, but it's actually really difficult to find the theatrical version anymore.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I'm sure I saw that.
Yeah.
I think the VHS was, and what's interesting too
Well,
is
it wasn't
that
until the early
the original
2000s.
theatrical 161-minute version is PG, whereas this director's cut was rated R, which
And
is
that's
interesting.
because one of the originally omitted scenes that has been added back actually has a bit of nudity in it.
Yes,
And that's Elizabeth Berridge, who plays Constance Mozart, is humiliated, basically, by F. Murray Abrams' Salieri. And he has her get naked in his room. And so
you know what? Then I might have seen
nudity,
the director's cut, when I was a kid, because I do remember at one point seeing. I was like 6 years old, and when you see nudity at that age, it's like
blows your mind.
So I think I may have seen, again. I was so young then that it doesn't really matter either way which I saw then, because I hardly remember the movie, but yeah, it's
like I want to say that it was the early 2000s, and I could be completely wrong here, but I want to say like around 2002-ish or something when the DVD was released.
Yeah, 2002 was the director's cut.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm sure I still have the VHS somewhere at my mom's place. I can check,
memories are so inaccurate. It's who knows? You may have seen the original version, and then you may have followed that up by seeing the director's cut, and then maybe you merge those two in your mind, But that is one of the, and I do think that the director's cut, I think the scenes that they add back in are actually really helpful. And that scene that we just discussed, I don't want to digress too much here, but is important because it actually kind of helps bolster the ending of the film. When she walks in on Salieri asleep and Mozart is dead, this humiliation that she experienced in front of him when she takes the score away and locks it away, kind of foiling his final plan, which was to actually claim that piece of music as his own.
And there is actually, weirdly enough, there is an element of, again, truth to that. Not in the way that it was Salieri's plan to steal it, but that Mozart died while writing the Requiem, and it was finished by contemporaries.
Yeah.
But
so there are these little kernels. Yeah, there's these.
But it's like
kernels.
That's what I think is a great way to make a movie like this, which is like just use. It's kind of like it's like adapting source material from a book, where you can choose elements that work in film, that work better in film, and adapt those to a different medium. It doesn't really matter the accuracy to whatever novel it is that's being adapted. I know some people are the opposite, where it's like accuracy is all they care about, but I've always felt that who cares about accuracy? What matters is getting an idea out and
well, yeah, I mean, the film is not a biography of Amadeus. It's about, I mean, again, in my mind, it's about a longing for greatness.
Yes, yeah.
And we've talked about this before, that fact doesn't equal truth, or truth doesn't equal fact.
Yeah.
That there is an aesthetic truth that's much more important than an accountant's truth. And I think that absolutely is more effective in works of art than just trying to stick to some kind of accountant's truth of fact. Even in documentary films, I don't think that works.
Totally. Yeah,
and I think films that try, especially with biopic films, and there's been a lot recently, biopic films that try, I never like them. I very rarely like biopic films that try to kind of represent things historically accurate. And, they always come off to me as dry and.
Well, I think the other issue is that they very
usually.
Rarely say anything beyond this was the life of the person.
Yeah, like look how great this person was is usually what it is.
If you distill and again, I kind of relate this film to which is another previous movie that we just did, Ed Wood, in that the portrayal of these these artists is much more in line with their art as opposed to what they actually were like in real life. Like in Ed Wood, how Johnny Depp is portraying Ed Wood like he is a character in his movie, like he's a representation of the way that he made movies. And in this, the portrayal of Mozart as this very kind of like manic character is much in line with the way that his music sounds, like that his music is so energetic and like very lifelike and full of life, which I'm sure at the time, like one of the reasons that his music was probably lauded when he was alive was because it was so different from the way that people were writing music then, and because it was so, you know, energetic. And we now may look back on that and go, well, that's just classical music, it's boring or whatever. But I think that, you know, I'm someone who really likes a lot of classical music. I think if you compare that to contemporary music at the time, yeah, he would have been like a force to reckon with in terms of like, everyone was like, God, like it would be like someone in the 50s inventing, you know, not by a comparison of quality, but it would be like someone in the 50s inventing like techno. Like it was like suddenly this, you know, lifelike force of nature came on. So I think that the way that they choose to portray him as again, very much so, a force of nature, this person who is the center of attention in every room that he's in, who's like crass and, you know, jokes around. And there is some truth there that he apparently did have a very juvenile sense of humor. Like there are letters from him to his father where he says like, "Kish mein Arsch" or something, and would love to play jokes on people like that, and apparently was very humorous. But all that stuff is just exaggerated to portray an idea much more so than to portray an accurate, you know, representation of what life was like for Mozart in his day-to-day, or Salieri, or, you know, any of the people in this movie.
Well, I think that and also if you look at Milos's other work, some of his other work, I think it's pretty clear that he's interested in outsiders. And, you know, another one of my favorite films, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he directed in 1975. Clearly that film was about an outsider, or actually a full group of outsiders.
Yeah, but also an outsider within a group of outsiders.
And yes, an outsider within.
The script in terms of that, yeah.
I think this film, you know, Mozart is clearly presented as an outsider here. People versus Larry Flint. Larry Flint is presented as an outsider. Man on the Moon, Andy Kaufman, played by Jim Carrey, you know, clearly an outsider there. So these, you know, these rebels, these outsiders, these renegades, it's clearly something that Milos is interested in. And, you know, using these, aside from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, using real people who really existed. And certainly there's a kernel of that renegadeness, that exceptionalism, that outsiderness, you know, did really exist. But taking that kernel and really, you know, dramatizing that and, you know, fictionalizing that and emphasizing that in these films is definitely a theme here. And Milos is fantastic at it. And all those films that I listed.
And perhaps it's also
great.
an advantage of taking something from stage. And I want to get into this later too, because stylistically, I think one of the great things about this movie is that it does what a lot of film adaptations of a stage play.
So let's just real quick. Yeah, so Peter Shaffer. Yeah, so just a little background. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the
writing. So Peter Shaffer's wrote the screenplay, but also wrote the play Amadeus,
it was a very successful play. It ran for I think over 1,000 productions on Broadway. Just interestingly,
had some very big names in it. Tim Curry,
Ian McKellen was Salieri. Tim Curry was Mozart. Other actors.
Mark Hamill also apparently was Mozart at one point, which I think would be very interesting to see.
A lot of actors rotated through because it did run so long. But yeah, I mean, so a very successful play. And you know, this is not the first time that Milos has adapted a play for a successful film. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Likewise, Kirk Douglas led that production. Hair is another film.
Yeah. Ragtime, which is sort of the opposite. Ragtime was a book, then the movie, then the
then
musical.
Which
I was actually in Ragtime in the musical, but
we got to get some footage of that.
I've got some. I've got
post a link to YouTube in the comments.
But
you're like, no, I think, change the subject real fast.
There's such a oftentimes when a stage play is being adapted, that there is a tendency to almost represent the film as a stage play. There's like a lot of carryover of style, and while there is a lot of, you know, drawn out extended takes in this film where people are very much performing, and there's also literal stage productions in the play. I think that this movie does Milos does is very smart, which is to adapt that into cinematic language. But the other advantage, I think, of taking something like this from a play is that I find, and I think that this is a really interesting part about live theater, is that it's often a lot easier to get away with in an audience's perception inaccuracies. That live theater very often plays up, these inaccuracies for fun and heightens these and so like you can very much get a sense of this being based off of a stage play because of the idea of this rivalry between Salieri and Mozart, and playing that up and making a story around that. Very much, to me, it kind of screams something that's very theatrical. And I feel like you would almost get more, not necessarily flack, but you would have more complaints about it had that not initially come from the stage play, because I think that there are a lot of pedants in terms of cinema that when something is not necessarily super accurate in the context of a movie, that they can kind of complain. Like there's always these conversations about like the accuracy of this or that, or articles are written about like how historically accurate is this. You don't really get stuff like that. That's really about, like, I think people are a lot more accepting of heightened theatricality on the stage.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. And of course, you didn't exist. You weren't even alive, and I was very young, and so I don't even, I don't know if that was ever something that the media harped on or discussed about Amadeus. Of course, when this film was released, you didn't have throngs of internet experts.
Yes,
wacky people doing podcasts like us, or people on Reddit and blogs and all these things. So there was a lot less conversation in that sense. There was a lot of water cooler conversation. There was a lot of actually more so, I think, than today, because I think that films like this were much more cultural touchstones than they are today. But as far as like in the media, I would be curious to see if that was ever something that was brought up in what little bit of criticism of not criticism in a negative sense, but I just mean, criticism as in just like film critics writing. That I read about this film. I didn't see anybody mention anything about the historical accuracy of this film. And that's interesting because you're right. I do get a sense that when these kinds of films are released today, there is often a conversation about the historical accuracy of it, and that's an interesting hypothesis.
And if for no other reason than exactly like you said, where it's like it's a clickbaity headline that people will click on
maybe
Facebook.
Maybe that's the explanation. But that's an interesting hypothesis that you bring up, which is that its long successful theatrical run. I wonder if that did have an impact on its acceptance. Well,
because I wonder, so often when things are, and again, I wasn't around when this was made, nor was I around obviously when the stage play was going on. I wonder how was it, because you can have things that were massive on stage today that are adapted into movies, and so many people don't realize that they were stage plays,
right?
So I wonder how common the knowledge was that it was first a stage play. I guess the opening credits do say based on the stage play by
that does give it away, yeah.
So, but I mean, even so, like, people just don't even pay attention to that. So I wonder if, and it's just sort of like an interesting kind of thing about like the cultural idea of like accuracy in things. And I don't have a set answer on it.
No, it's just an interesting question, and it's an interesting observation. Because I do think it's important. And again, I think there is this, this kind of fundamental artistic question, which is, fact versus truth. That's what that speaks to. I'm curious, like what your thoughts are, because I know that you often approach a film from a very like kind of cinematographic. That's not a word.
Yeah, that's
from
sort of
a
almost
visual.
Like visual.
I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on the cinematography of this film. I mean, in my mind, it's pretty simply shot. It's shot anamorphic, which I like, but I know you've got some thoughts. I want to hear what you think about
so
that.
I think that the movie looks really good. I mean,
it's beautifully production design. The production design's beautiful.
The production design's brilliant.
Costumes are beautiful.
I think even I think that even the this is one of those instances where I'm like, I think that the cinematography looks really good, but I disagree with the choice being made. Which
I'm curious.
Which is that it's shot, so it's shot on anamorphic.
Yeah.
And to me, aspect ratio and things like that matter so much in of course, and I'm sure you would agree, and it's a very common conversation about like the context of the story, what that something as simple as aspect ratio matters so much.
Yeah.
And the choice of lenses. And so to me, anamorphic lenses are a very modern, modern in the grand scheme of things, choice. And, if you think of anamorphic, and just in case, somebody isn't quite familiar with the term, an anamorphic lens is basically what is used to shoot like a widescreen movie. So in the background, you'll notice that the out of focus areas are a little bit more ovular, and it squeezes the image. And there's a lot of technical sides, but basically it's widescreen. It's a
And you get you generally when if you're just a viewer and you're without getting into technical stuff, what that kind of matter of factly means is that you'll see if you've ever seen Die Hard. And you see those the flares that are blue flares.
Yeah, the horizontal streak flares.
Horizontally streak out. That's a sign of an anamorphic lens. You'll also
anamorphic. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say you'll also generally see a softening of focus around the edges of the frame. That's usually
and really a lot of barrel distortion.
Distortion.
The edges aren't necessarily straight lines. There's kind of a distortion on them.
Right.
And so that was used so much during the 70s, and they kind of came about in the 50s, but they really, took off in their use in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and kind of became almost like a staple of blockbuster action cinema.
Right.
And to me, I think that a choice like that doesn't really match the subject matter, mostly because of the fact that I think that you can make such a powerful choice with just simply what lenses you're choosing to shoot on. In that, the way that culture thinks back on the 1700s, the 1800s, so on and so forth, is only through paintings. Photography was only really coming about in the 1800s.
Yeah.
All everything we see of Mozart or of his life or of that time is paintings.
Right.
And so I think that using something that is so like an anamorphic, which is so linked to cinema, so linked to
it's artifacts.
There's not really anything else like it. Even photography is so. There are people who do anamorphic photography, but it's very rare. It's much more of a kind of a thing to do versus a
gimmick almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that to me, the choice to shoot this anamorphic doesn't really not that it looks bad in any way, but doesn't really match up with the subject matter. It doesn't really do anything to me to bring me into the world of this movie. I think that if this movie was shot spherically, that you would get a much more painterly kind of style out of it, that it would match the subject matter, it would match the production design.
So to make sure I understand what you're saying, so in your mind, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that you kind of feel like the lens choice is anachronistic to the subject. Basically, it's you're saying that since our only representations of this era are through paintings, to use something so specific and that introduces artifacts that are unique to the technology of cinema, that you feel like that's when the choice could have been made to use a spherical lens, which would have much less obvious or unique artifacting.
Cinematic artifacting.
Yeah, so you feel like that would have been a more appropriate kind of to the era.
There's sort of two kind of comparisons I can make too. One of them is for example, Coppola decided not to use any zoom lenses on The Godfather because zoom lenses weren't around in the era that the movie is set. And so he made a specific choice that he wanted to shoot it, spherically, because also anamorphic wasn't a thing then. It came out in the 50s. So he made a choice to shoot spherically on only primes so that the language of the lenses matched the era. Spielberg chose to shoot Schindler's List in black and white, primarily black and white. Of course, the modern day stuff is color, but chose to shoot that in black and white because his decision on that was that the footage that you see of that, the photos that you see of the events of the Holocaust are black and white, and so it brings you into this world. Not that there obviously haven't been movies made about World War II and stuff that are not anamorphic, or there were plenty of anamorphic World War II movies. There were plenty of color World War II movies. But I think that it's one of those things where you know, when you're thinking about these choices, I think that it's one of those examples where it's like, I think the movie looks great. Amadeus, I think it looks really, really fantastic. I just would have made a different decision if I was,
Sure.
you know, in that chair at that time, which I'm not going to pretend that I could make a movie as great as Amadeus, but if I were to, you know, have made this movie in some
you would have made a different choice.
Random world, I would have made the choice.
I mean that's it's an interesting way to look at it for sure. And I think, you know, just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, I feel like I think it's perfectly in line with the spirit of the film, which, you know, the subject matter itself is totally fictionalized. And you have such a modernization of language. Clearly, people did not speak this way, nor are their accents,
in American accents,
even remotely appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of poetic license there. And I feel like the anamorphic lenses, I think they look beautiful, but I also think beyond that, they're beneficial because you have so many scenes that take place, these performances, these huge scenes that take place in these opera houses, in these theaters. And there's just so much going on. There's these, you know, elaborate costumes and huge high wigs and chandeliers, and you know, it's just that the frame is just filled with so much data. And I think the benefit of the anamorphic lens in this situation, where it kind of brings some of those more peripheral you know, visual contents a little bit out of focus, I think it actually helps kind of bring your eye to the subject matter and that's important. So I think it helps a little bit, you know, with guiding the eye, and kind of keeping you from being so overwhelmed. And because some of these and there's a lot of, we haven't talked about music yet, but there's an extended, like at length, long musical performances that are captured here. You know, I mean, it's where the camera is almost, you know, it's like as if, you know, it's like the earliest of films where basically the camera was just sat in, you know, where an audience would sit in a theater and we see the whole stage. And it just plays out before us. There's a little bit of that going on. Obviously, we have editing, and I mean, I'm not saying it's to that extreme. We definitely do to have different angles, and the camera's moving around a bit. But there are, you know, there's a lot of that in here. There's a lot of extended performance. Of course, I mean, my goodness, you know, like what a like embarrassment of riches to have Mozart's music to draw from, right?
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, clearly the film benefits greatly from having Mozart's music as its soundtrack. And I think, you know, one of the things that I really do love about this film, and I actually think that I would just kind of compare just for a second. What was that movie with Gary Oldman about Beethoven? Beloved, I think it was.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen the film, but I was just going to say that this film, like Beloved, I think does one thing really well, and that is that it...
Immortal Beloved, yeah.
Immortal Beloved, that's it. Thank you so much. And I don't think that film is anywhere near as good as this film, but one of the things both films, I think, does really well is really effectively imparts this absolute, like, appreciation of the beauty of music to the audience. I mean... Like, you know, through Salieri, when we see him reading these scores, and then the music that he's reading, you know, we start to hear it, you know, in the score of the film, and it's just, you know, watching F. Murray's performance and listening to this music. It's like, I mean, geez, and you know, I think even if you're not a music fan, you can't help but to be moved, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the most brilliant things that they do is the rewrite of Salieri's like entry march, and I think that what that does is it brings somebody who may not have any interest in classical music or you know, be in any way interested in the distinction between what Mozart was doing versus his contemporaries. It's immediately brilliant. Shows, you know, you've got Salieri's music that sounds quite typical of classical music at the time.
Yeah.
And then to offset that and to kind of prove to you how groundbreaking Mozart was for the time, he rewrites it. And then you hear how much more energetic and you know, how much more functional and
well,
interesting
a layperson
Mozart's.
can. I think that's a brilliant observation. They do this right off the bat in nearly the very beginning of the film, and so it's, you know, hey, if you are unfamiliar with Mozart, if you are unfamiliar, which of course most people would be with Salieri, if you're a total layperson, if you don't have really any education in classical music, you're right. They lay this out so that anybody can see, the difference. And it may be a little unfair to Salieri, this example they use, but it's a super, super simple, kind of march or kind of, introduction piece of music. And then, once Mozart gets his hands on it, there's all this flourish and fun, and it goes from a stiff, stodgy piece of music that's not very interesting at all to this, fun piece of music with personality and joy in it. So you're right. They do a great job of using music to color character and illustrate the contrast between the two characters right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's incredibly, it's also, I think, when you see the reactions of, I'm forgetting who is the first guy that Mozart is working for? Who's the original guy that he kind of leaves to work for the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor?
I'm trying to. Gosh, now you're going to put me to task here. If I think I understand your question,
I can't remember the character. So he's working for this other man at the beginning.
Wasn't it the
Pope?
Pope?
I like the idea that you've got all these people who kind of despise him as a person, but want him there for his talent, like that refuse to get rid of him simply because of his talent, and that Salieri cannot stand that, but also totally understands it, and that he is also one of those people. Mm-hmm. Salieri is in every way sitting there admiring every time he sees Mozart's music, and is going nuts about it. And just when he's reading the papers that Constance brings him, and he drops them, and he says, it's magnificent, and all this, that you've just got this completely, I think, empathetic approach to character, which is that, he seemed like he was a total pain in the ass. And again, that's not the historically necessarily accurate version, but in terms of the context of the movie, that you're sitting there like, this guy would have been, very annoying to have around, and yet it does such a great job, the film, of presenting him, because every time the music plays, the movie focuses on the music. The movie focuses on his music. Yeah. And so not only do the people in the film forget that he is, difficult to deal with for those, 10 minutes of music that's playing, but the audience also just kind of is brought into that world as well, because you're kind of sitting there going, oh yeah, this guy was, a brilliant musician, and composer. But I do like that you've got, it's not necessarily a huge part of the movie, but you do see this idea that like these higher ups, these kings, these emperors, etc., put up with the kind of brazen back talking and rudeness and lack of etiquette from him, simply because of the fact that they admired his work so much, and there's this kind of a funny little like almost father-son relationship with any figure of authority in this movie, where he has, Mozart has no issue talking back to royalty and talking back to the Holy Roman Emperor himself. And, I think it just makes, again, the movie a lot more accessible, and weirdly makes the character of Mozart in this movie much more, the movie does a very good job of making you empathetic of each character, which I think is often tough to do in a period piece like this.
I one of the things, talking about music, and I think what an integral, obviously, but how well it's used here is, I think, near the end of the film, there's like big chunks of this film where not much else is going on, and if it weren't,
yes, yeah.
And there's this beautiful interplay of the discussion of the music, and then the music coming in. And I think this, the scene where Mozart is in bed ill, mm-hmm. and Salieri is taking dictation and helping him write the music that he's hearing. If you just kind of almost if you were to watch it without the sound on, you would see that there's this long stretch of time where you've just got a character in bed and a character sitting next to him, and we just go back and forth. And, considering it's a film, it's moving pictures, there's mm-hmm. not a lot being told, not a lot of story being told visually. but the music sure does come in and do a lot of heavy lifting and really does it well. And this beautiful interplay, with Schaefer's script and the writing. I mean, I would just imagine as an actor, if you were to get the script and you're looking at the scene and, and all the dialogue is like, it's just this kind of music lingo, which is like, okay, start on A minor. A minor? Yeah, A minor, of course. Okay, then go to D. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? If you were to read it on the page, right?
It's like, yeah.
There's hardly anything there. But it's, again, a big part of this, of course, is both actors' performances are outstanding.
The use of music.
But that's, and that use, and so that we can hear, we're actually like, it's illustrating to us, okay, what are they talking about? And it's kind of this fun little thing of getting to be almost, in the room as Mozart is writing. And I mean, I can't read music. I would imagine that most audience would not be able to read music or understand most of what they would be talking about.
So the terminology,
The terminology, which of course they keep it very simple, but nonetheless, I mean, we wouldn't be able to actually hear what they're talking about. So it's just, I mean, it's just a super effective way to use the music in the film, and it does it numerous times. And whether it's building character or
it's one of those kind of like ingenious things because it's very simple. It's a very simple choice.
Yeah,
but it just works so well.
I mean, in the hands of these performers too. I mean, we touched on it, but God, I just want to. I mean, look, I think everybody's good in the film, but F. Murray Abraham is just knocks it out of the park.
He plays disdain like no other.
I mean, he really knocks it out of the park, and it's interesting. I can't remember if this was the commentary or there's like a little like making of documentary. I think it's actually in the making of documentary that's on the Blu-ray for this film. And I'm kind of surprised that Milos said this because you could potentially take this as a little bit insulting, but he talks about how he felt like F. Murray Abraham would be the ideal actor for this role. I mean, not only, of course, he's a great actor, yes, but he was like, he said that he felt like F. Murray Abraham actually had these qualities, that he kind of was Salieri-like, that he, was kind of full of ego and pride and kind of approached his, that kind of embodied some of these things that Milos wanted Salieri to represent in this film. And I'm kind of surprised he said that out loud.
Yeah, that's funny.
In the documentary, because it's like you very rarely ever hear, because it'd be easy to take that in a derogatory way,
Yeah.
So I was a little taken aback that he said that, but it makes sense, and I think you can kind of see that. I think obviously I don't know F. Murray Abraham, but I can certainly imagine. I mean, having recognized that in myself, and in so many artists, I could completely see how that could be just a trait that's inherent in that actor. And Milos pulled that out of him even further in the performance. But I mean, I really just think,
Is there anything in the director's commentary about their relationship, the two leads' relationship during production?
Not that I recall, not anything specific, except this. So as we could kind of previously discussed, F. Murray Abraham, they shot all of the stuff where he's older and he's in the asylum after his suicide attempt, and they shot all that first over the first couple 2-3 weeks, and that allowed them to kind of set up logistics for other things while they were shooting. So they did that first, and so I think they kind of talked a little bit about how that kind of isolated him a little bit from, the rest of the production. He wasn't, working with Mozart, or with, Tom, the performer playing Mozart. So I think, there probably was a little bit of that isolation, or kind of, that probably did lend itself a little bit to the, the like conflict or butting heads that might have existed on camera, But other than that, they didn't really go into too much detail. But I just, God, I mean, I feel like that. I mean, as somebody who has acted before, and I'm a big fan, I can only imagine having this role and how juicy all those monologues were.
Yes. Yeah.
And can you imagine?
And all the, I mean, again, even all just like the points where you just act visually. The points where he's just like a tertiary element of a scene, and he's just standing, I'm thinking all the moments when Mozart is talking with
Omart?
Omart, yeah.
Are you
Is
trying to
talking with
speak
the emperor
backwards?
and
Are
all
you trying to
that.
speak backwards
Yeah.
like in the film?
Yes, exactly. But when they're having that conversation with the emperor, when Mozart's kind of introduced, and that Salieri is very much just kind of like a tertiary element, but there's so much energy coming from him, and you can feel like every choice that he's making is so present and so clear, which is, I think, a really tough thing to do, to be sort of a part of an ensemble in a scene and still play up the elements that you want to play up and have them come across clearly. But he does it super well.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's great in the film, and F. Murray
Yeah.
Abraham definitely gets the biggest, I think, chunk of praise, but Tom Hulce is really wonderful too. And I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, and I guess you had talked about how he kind of made a shift from acting to producing and directing for the stage, where he has actually had a ton of success. I mean, he's been nominated or won several Tony Awards and Drama Desk Awards.
Yes.
So he's definitely been successful on the stage, as a producer, director. But I was almost surprised. I think I remember even as a kid wondering, like, why am I not seeing movies with this guy in it?
Yeah.
Because I thought he did such a great job, and to have the title role in such a hugely critically and commercially successful film, I was a little bit surprised that I didn't see more of him.
To be nominated and
So,
but he chose to retire. So yeah,
interesting.
From acting at least. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I would be curious to kind of ask him or wonder what went down with that.
Well, I mean, it could just be like that. For example, I always enjoyed acting as well, but I have not really much desire to do it as a career.
Could be.
Even though I really enjoyed it, and
maybe he was just longing for greatness, like Salieri.
Yes, exactly.
Just felt he could.
Yeah, he fit in perfectly. Life imitates art.
Yeah, there you go. Life definitely does.
Or maybe it was the loss. Yeah, it was the loss of the Academy Award to Salieri. And
I mean, that had to be.
The roles were reversed.
Yeah, I guess, and kind of a final irony there. Yeah. That was probably difficult, I would imagine, for a film where so many other people are winning in their positions to have a best picture and then to.
Well, I wonder how many times has that happened where you have two
best picture without a best actor, or now remember
two
though,
lead actors. From the movie.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So he didn't win, but that was because he lost to. The film was kind of competing against itself in this category.
Because of course, something very often is there a best actor, best supporting actor, best actress, best supporting actress from the same movie, but very rarely are there two best actor nominations.
Yeah,
from
I would imagine that is rare. I don't know the answer to that, but I would imagine that has not happened too often.
Yeah,
that's got to feel weird. I guess that's kind of a continuation. Like you said, art and life. It's like the competition that existed in the film between the characters kind of actually ended up existing in real life between the actors. And this time Salieri wins out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed talking about Amadeus with you, sir.
It's been a lot of fun, yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, and I hope everybody out there, you enjoyed listening to it as well. We wish you a most wonderful couple weeks. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.